What's going on, guys? It is time to prepare. So we're going to be talking about national security, emerging threats, along with ways to prepare financially for you and for your family. Now, we're going to be digging into a story that's got U.S. officials just pulling their hair out right now. So there are these huge Chinese-made cranes operating at ports across the country, including some that are used by the military. And apparently, they got some pretty sophisticated sensors that can actually track the origin and the destination of containers. And that's got a lot of people worried that China could be using these cranes as a spying tool, essentially giving them access to very sensitive information about U.S. military operations. Here, check this out.
The Pentagon sees giant cargo cranes as possible Chinese spying tools. Equipment at U.S. ports could pose a risk of surveillance or sabotage. China says concerns are paranoia-driven. Do you know much about this, sir?
No, I don't know any of the details about it, but nothing about that surprises any of us, right? I mean, China is conducting the most comprehensive penetration of the United States in our history. And certainly surveillance is one of those goals. We saw spy balloons obviously, and we had huge trouble in how to deal with that effectively. But we got to recognize what China, their goals are so comprehensive. They want to replace the United States as the world's leader. And they want to dominate in four areas: economically, militarily, technologically, and geopolitically. They are an economic superpower now, but they have some headwinds in front of us. They are the most rapid growing military in the world, and they do dominate in the Indo-Pacific region, but a far cry from dominating the world the way the United States does. But technologically, I mean, they are really on the move here. ASPI's critical technology tracker is saying that China is rapidly becoming the world's superpower in terms of science and technology. They track 44 advanced technologies. China is leading in 37 of them.
I mean, that's just crazy, right? You cannot make this stuff up. Let me know what you guys think. Do you feel like we're exposing our country to China too much? Hit me up in the comments down below, you guys. Now, I heard from a friend of mine. He was working remotely from home until the company wanted to put a camera in his house. The instructions were in Chinese. He said, no way. But over 100 other people in the company, they agreed to do it. And he's working in tech, so these Chinese eyes on his work could be something big here. Now, as for my friend, he's already started a new job with a nice pay upgrade. Yep, he got a nice pay bump. But really, what I'm seeing here is just how much the United States depends on China for economic and shipping power. We got to really start thinking about ways to reduce that dependency and build up our own commercial fleet. And of course, we also need to make sure that our ports and our infrastructure are secure. And for the best way to invest in gold, be sure to hit the links in the description down below this video. So Massport purchased these 3 huge cranes that are made from China. But now the government is worried that they could be used for spying on the United States shipping operations, including some at the spots that the military uses. I mean, can you imagine that the Chinese is just kind of looking at a screen with a hidden camera in the crane operations, and they're kind of like, oh, that one came from us. Wow, we really supply all of their goods. And who knows whatever else that they're able to see. They're thinking that these cranes that are made by a company called ZMPC might actually be a sneaky way for China to just spy on us. Like, for real. Even though they're well made and cheap, they're packed with these fancy sensors that can keep tabs on where containers come from and where they're going. And that's got some national security and Pentagon people thinking that China could use this information to figure out what kind of stuff that we're shipping in and out of our ports and to and from our military all over the world. And that's another thing. These cranes might let some random person mess with the flow of all of our goods. That is according to Bill Evanina, who is the big shot of the U.S. counterintelligence. So China basically makes all of the shipping containers in the world and controls a shipping data service. So if they got control over the ports too, that would be a whole lot of power. It's just not the cranes either. There are other things that are made in China that could be used for surveillance or to mess with the United States, like baggage screening systems and electrical transformers. In December, lawmakers passed a defense bill that will require the Transportation Department to look into whether or not foreign-made cranes pose any security threats at U.S. ports. Now, just to be clear, there haven't been any cases of the cranes being used for anything sketchy yet. But back in February, the U.S. shot down a high-altitude balloon that was allegedly made by a Chinese company with ties to the military. You guys remember that. It had all kind of antennas and sensors for collecting intel and communications. So yeah, Western law enforcement is definitely worried about Chinese espionage and tech theft. Now, as for the crane company ZPMC, they've been pretty quietly taken over. ZPMC says that they're like the biggest maker of cranes in the world, selling them to over 100 companies, and almost 80% of the ship-to-store cranes used in America are made by them, according to a U.S. official. ZPMC is part of China Communications Construction Company. It's a leading contractor for Chinese leader Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to develop infrastructure and trade links across Asia, Africa, and other regions. In 2020, the U.S. authorities limited the access of 5 CCCC units to U.S. technologies, saying that the company's role in Beijing's military-civil fusion program was something that needed to be looked into, among other reasons. Now, these huge cranes, they come fully assembled on ships, and they use software made in China. Sometimes Chinese workers with 2-year visas do maintenance. Now, I don't know what they're doing when it comes to maintenance though, but this is a possible way to spy on stuff. Now, the Defense Intelligence Agency did a secret report in 2021 and said Beijing could totally mess with the port traffic or spy on military gear. In the last couple of years, some ports in Virginia, South Carolina, Maryland, which sometimes are used by nearby U.S. military bases, they got some new cranes from ZPMC. Now, this definitely caused concern within the national security community and the FBI, at least according to the sources that we know of. And get this, guys, back in 2021, FBI agents searched a cargo ship delivering ZPMC cranes to the Baltimore port, and they found some intelligence gathering equipment on board. Last year, Representatives Carlos Gimenez, a Republican from Florida and former mayor of Miami-Dade County, introduced a bill to stop the U.S. from buying cranes that are made in China and to promote other manufacturers. The congressman became aware of the potential for ZPMC crane software to be used for bad things and proposed the legislation. Miami-Dade County's port has some cranes that are made by ZPMC, but it's kind of sad that America is so dependent on China. Why aren't we building more of our own equipment right here at home? We're not a producing nation anymore. We're a using and consumption nation, and it's going to lead to an epic collapse. And it says right here, America's dependence on China is a crisis in a making. Now, taking a look at the situation, the supply chain mess in America, it's still going strong. The West Coast ports are so jam-packed that shippers are now going through the East Coast ports. The problem now is that container ships are now stuck in line offshore at ports like New York, Houston, and Savannah, Georgia, waiting to get unloaded. It all started back when the C-19 virus pandemic hit and the powers that be decided to take action to flatten the curve. So this led to a major shortage of dock workers, warehouse workers, truckers, which ultimately caused a huge total mess. But I think that this situation at the ports and in our stores is an alarming reminder that we have become way too reliant on China and the Chinese Communist Party, also known as the CCP. But not only do we get a ton of consumer goods, medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, crucial raw materials from China, but they also own a big chunk of the world's shipping fleet, not to mention commercial shipbuilding capabilities. So this means that China's policies have a massive impact on both the global shipping industry and the production and distribution of their exports. You could consider that a huge double threat for America. So check this out. According to the UN's 2021 data, China owns over 7,000 big merchant ships. That's like 13.5% of the world's total tonnage. And 94% of commercial shipbuilding in 2019 was done by only 3 countries: China, South Korea, and Japan. Now, if something really bad went down in Asia, it could mess up these sources, these main vital sources of commercial shipbuilding, and really mess with the whole world market. And of course, that would include the good old US of A. Now, the supply chain issues in America all stem from the problems across the Pacific and China. It's not just the C-19 restrictions in Washington that's causing trouble. China's zero C-19 policy is putting many cities under lockdown, including Shanghai, which is home to a lot of the world's manufacturers. Now, these lockdowns, they created problems upriver, at factories at different ports like Tianjin, Shenzhen, causing delays for products that are headed to the United States. Now, the Chinese Communist Party, they're not afraid to use this industrial power for their political purposes either. They've put embargoes on steel for Australia, bananas for the Philippines, and even tourism for South Korea because of U.S. missile defenses. They've even stopped trading with Lithuania because they use the word Taiwan instead of to pay. The war in the Ukraine is also making things much worse because of supply chain concerns over raw materials like phosphates for fertilizer and neon gas, which is vital for microchip production. China has the ships and the resources to meet their own needs, but American consumers are left out in the cold. People in Congress have made the same concerns recently, and they passed the CHIPS Act, which, by the way, was supposed to help with the domestic semiconductor production. But listen, guys, we can't just bring all the shipbuilding production back to the United States. It's just not possible. Back in the 1980s, Congress created a committee to figure out what we needed for shipping, and they called this the Commission for Merchant Marine and Defense. They told Congress that we needed like 650 ocean-going cargo ships to be ready for a wartime emergency. But now our population has grown like 133%, and our economy has grown by almost 500%. And we only have 180 US flagged merchant ships that could be used in an emergency. This is just a fraction of what we needed back then. That was before all the growth. Now, on the bright side, it might be an opportunity to start producing things right here in America, especially since labor could be cheap due to mass layoffs. People will need jobs, and it'll be time to rebuild. But first, the government needs to figure out how we can build our own cranes here instead of buying them from China. Things are looking pretty bad because agencies like the United States Maritime Administration haven't been able to take action to secure our access to the markets. We really need to do something about China's zero C-19 policies and how they're affecting international supply chains. But then again, if we do that, it's kind of like, okay, we're trying to tell them how to run their country. That's not right either. We wouldn't like that, would we? We need to focus on increasing domestic shipping and shipbuilding, which, by the way, is important for both America's national security needs and its economy. We need to create an environment that encourages investment and innovation, and we should work with our partners from allied countries to reduce our dependence on the Chinese supply chain. But what do you guys think? But then again, maybe the government wants us to get all pissed off and back their idea to go to war with China. It's just a bunch of manipulation. Shooting down a Chinese spy balloon is just a waste of money. You guys know how much that cost us? Yeah. But they wanted to get it all in the news stories and make Congress start talking about it. So the government just kind of wants you to think that we should attack China because they got themselves in a sticky situation. In my opinion, China's probably not really all that bad. In fact, I've got numerous friends who actually visit and even live in China, and they're saying that the way it is in China is completely different than the propaganda that the news media promotes here in the United States. I think it's definitely time for people to just wake up and realize how our government is playing us. They printed way too much money, became too dependent on other countries, and they padded their own pockets. This is what they did to us. Bad car loans, bad student loans, bad housing loans, falling treasury values, falling bond values, falling cash deposits, inflation, failing commercial loans, repossessions. They basically systematically set our economy up for failure. Now, I'm telling you guys now, like I always say, prepare, prepare, prepare. We can only hope for the best here, but it's also good to prepare for the worst. You know what I'm saying? And this is why multiplying those streams of income and diversifying your financial baskets is priority one in my book. Start a side hustle or two. Just see what's out there. We could totally make another video about this if you guys want. Just drop your questions and requests in the comment section down below. But there you go, guys. Some meaty and important information coming up for you guys. Care of China spying update and daily news report. China using cranes to potentially spy on the United States. The U.S. being too reliant on China and the possibility of our whole economy just burning to the ground if U.S.-China war does actually happen. We got to prepare you guys also for the best way to invest in gold or silver. Hit the links in the description down below. Please share this video with your friends and your loved ones. Always get the word out. Please be kind to one another, and I'll see you guys on the next one.